All right. Hi, guys. Welcome back to Living with OCD. My name is Cassie. I am a peer advisor here at OCD. And once upon a time, I was somebody just like you, a member that was eagerly and very scared coming into therapy for the first time. So I'm going to be here to answer any questions that you guys have about therapy, about living with OCD. I'm not a clinician, so I like to start out just by saying that. I am somebody just like you that is living with OCD and navigating day by day. Hi, Anna. It's nice to see you. So, yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to discuss in the comments if you see other people that you frequently chat with. But yeah, I'm really excited to be talking with you guys. I'm going to be hitting my 1 year mark here at OCD in just actually a couple weeks. So I'm very excited. I can't believe it's only been a year. It feels like so much longer. So time really flies whenever you're having fun and doing all this great stuff. And I'm sure that you guys know after getting to a point of recovery and we have all this more free time with our mind, it's like, what do you do with all this time that we spent ruminating and obsessing over things? It's like all this free space that we have is things that we didn't have before. So I will go ahead and start looking at some of the comments that we have coming in. I'm really excited to be talking with you guys tonight. Okay. Okay, so let's start with this one. All cats know gluten. I love it. What would you want to know before your evaluation for OCD? I have a psych eval this month to figure this all out. So I guess something that I would like to know, and this goes for everybody that is going to be starting therapy. One thing that I would have liked to know before starting treatment is that it's okay to talk about everything. It's, I think with OCD, and it's not something that's very well understood by a lot of society, we get ourselves in this like, oh, is this something that's normal to talk about? Is this something that everybody else struggles with? And, what should I be talking about for my first session? And it's really hard to say. I always encourage people that if you aren't sure whether it's OCD or not, share it and talk about it. I know that whenever I went through therapy at OCD, I started out knowing that I had just right OCD. And by working with my therapist, I realized that I also have relationship OCD and moral scrupulosity, amongst all other themes trickled in there with it. So, if you're not sure whether something is worth mentioning, definitely mention it. The nice thing about working with OCD specialists too is that they're very, very comfortable with hearing about all these kinds of things, right? So, I have people talk to me sometimes about how they have harm OCD and they're afraid to say these thoughts out loud. And the nice thing is working with an OCD specialist is they're very used to hearing these kinds of things. So, they understand the difference between, trigger warning suicidal ideation versus saying, I want to do this, or I'm having obsessive thoughts about blank, but, that doesn't mean I'm blank. So they understand the difference between intention versus intrusive thoughts. It is very, very okay to talk about these kind of things with them. So I guess that's something that I would have wanted somebody to tell me is that, don't be afraid to open up. And I have people all the time still that I have calls with that are like, oh, this sounds so stupid. I don't know why I'm obsessing about this. And, it's not really stupid if it's giving you distress, if it's making you anxious or obsessed or depressed, whatever it may be, it's still causing you emotional distress. And that's the big thing that matters with this. That's why we're here, is to get better. All right. Bella Kim, hi, what are some good tips for social anxiety ERP? I actually don't know about this one. So if anyone in the comments has any tips, I definitely would encourage it. And Bella, if you're not in therapy yet, I would definitely join therapy and, work with your therapist to come up with some good ERP exercises. Even if somebody has the same type of OCD as me, our exposures might look completely different. So it's hard to say, what some good exercises are. But as far as tips for social anxiety, um, I that's something that I don't have a ton, and thankfully so, because I probably wouldn't be able to do these. But I will say that if I did have social anxiety, some things that I would try to do are probably mindful techniques, because I know that whenever I get really bad anxiety, I start to disassociate. And if I had social anxiety, that's probably what I would do. Um, so I would say that the best thing, in my opinion, would be to try to ground yourself and bring yourself back to center. It's very easy when we have OCD for our mind to suddenly go from point A to point Z all the way over there. And it can be kind of challenging to maintain your thought process and control it to that present moment. It's not something that you should ever be angry at yourself for or upset, because it's just something that we unfortunately have to deal with. So I try to do grounding techniques. One of the ones that is my favorite is going through my five senses and trying to name different things that I can see and different things I can smell, and touch. Really focus on what your immediate surrounding is, and it kind of forces my mind to stop thinking about whatever is all the way at point Z and come back to point A where I'm currently at. But really good question. Christian, did you have a hard time finding quality psychiatric care? Any tips on doing so? Yes, I have told people before it kind of feels like it's a full time job to be taking care of your mental health. I'm sure that you guys can all relate to this. It feels like a complete struggle, and you have to really be your own advocate. That being said, I think there are resources that you can use to find good help. Um, One of those is, of course, if you're here, hopefully you're getting therapy through an OCD, and you have a therapist, you have a care team behind you, lots of people to make sure that you're staying and getting proper care where you need it. As far as getting psychiatrists and, everything, general doctors outside of that, there's a huge world out there, and there's a lot of options and a lot of not good options. So I always recommend, if you're trying to find something that's affordable and you have insurance, I always tell people go to your insurance's website and look for, if you're looking for a psychiatrist, if you're looking for a talk therapist outside of an ERP specialist, whatever it may be. That's a really good resource to use to find exactly what is in coverage with your plan and what isn't. Um, Aside from that, if you are looking for somebody that is familiar with OCD, but you're not going to be with an OCD, there are definitely some things that I try to recommend. One of those being, if you're going to a therapist or a psychiatrist and you want to know that they understand OCD, I would ask what their experience is with ERP. Exposure and response prevention is the best form of treatment for OCD, and most psychiatrists and all therapists who are OCD therapists should understand what ERP is and how to practice it. If they don't, then chances are they're probably going to be treating it like regular anxiety, which is, I'm sure you guys all know, not what we want to be doing. So, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it, but you can also look on the IOCDF's website, the International OCD Foundation, and see what kind of things are in your area that you can use, whether it's support groups that are in person or therapists, psychiatrists, whatever it may be that you're looking for. They link a lot of really great resources on there. But really great question. Okay, so Bella, can I do this without medication? Honestly, I don't know. And I can't really answer that for anybody because we are all our own person, and it's hard to say what we are and aren't capable of. I've talked to so many people out there who did therapy with medication, who did it without medication, who staggered and did it at different points. It's really hard to say. So I would recommend do what you feel is best for you. Go to a psychiatrist who understands OCD. Get really good tailored therapy, like at an OCD. You are able to come at this at different angles and find what combination is best for you. And if it doesn't work the first time around or the first medication that you try, that's totally okay. There's so many other options out there, and it really is what's finding best for you. Another thing, too, that I like to emphasize to people is that try not to compare yourself too much to other people's journeys, because somebody who also has OCD like you might not have depression, or they might have OCD and also bipolar. You never know what that person is dealing with. So it's hard to compare your journey to somebody else's. So, if you're not sure what to do, talk to a doctor, talk to somebody who's familiar with your medical background, and, try your options, see what all is out there. Okay. Brianna said, just getting back into ERP, congrats. I'm having a hard time remembering not to get lost in the fear. It definitely feels subconscious at times. Any advice on how to be more aware? It's really hard to be aware or not aware of the fear for me, I guess. I think I just struggled with avoidance. Like, I would set a reminder to do an exposure at 6 p.m., and come 5:45, I would magically be busy with something else. So, I guess that could have been considered fear. I don't know. I would say, though, that if you are having a hard time getting lost in fear, try to remember what you're doing this for and what your goals are. For me, I hit a turning point in my recovery where I kind of had this kind of sad realization that, excuse me, that I was going to be the only person really that was going to save myself, that, nobody else was. Excuse me, one moment. Sorry. All right. Sorry, guys. I've had this awful cough I cannot get rid of, and, struggles of being asthmatic. So for me, I think that's something that was really important to make sure that I stayed focused and didn't let fear get in the way. Was I tried to remember what I was working for, and I think that something that was a big turning point for me was I kind of had this, oh, I am a victim to this, and I'm never going to get better. And I had to take this turning point where, um, you know, I realized that I had to make that choice to get better, and I had to want to do it. And that's really honestly where I told myself I couldn't keep putting off my exposures, and I couldn't keep pushing off therapy sessions. But I'm trying to think. Oh, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry about that. Another thing too is that whenever I started doing ERP exposures and I started becoming, um, I guess, successful at it, so I was getting through exposures and my anxiety was starting to die down a lot faster, and I wasn't spending so much time ruminating afterwards. Like, I remember the first time I got through an exposure and I told myself that I was going to put off doing my compulsion just for 10 minutes. And 10 minutes went by, and I was like, let me push off for 10 more minutes. I kept trying to delay doing my compulsion. And after a while, and it felt terrible, like I felt like somebody was squeezing me, like I was doing the opposite of what I was supposed to be doing. And I was doing this horrible thing. Like, I need to just do it. I just need to do this compulsion and get it out of the way. And I kept telling myself, no, I'm putting it off. I'm putting it off. And finally, later that evening, I looked back and I realized I never did that compulsion. And I wasn't anxious anymore. I was totally calm. And I almost felt like I had this weight lifted off my chest. Um, that this thing was telling me that I had to do this compulsion, this thing, in order for XYZ to be okay. And I made it through it. And I didn't need to do this task that I thought I had to do. And that moment kind of motivated me like, wow, I feel so good. I feel so free. If I can continue doing that, like, who knows where I'm going to be? And I kept trying to do that, whether it's being able to fully resist compulsions or putting it off for a period of time. you know, it's something that I think, if you can't do it perfectly, trying is the best thing you can do. Trying to do even 50% if you can't do 100%, whatever it may be. I think that you hit a certain point where you're like, okay, I want to keep feeling like this. I stood up to this monster, and who knows where I can go from there. So sorry I'm coughing so much. This is so weird. Okay. What are your thoughts on contamination OCD and how to deal with it? Very hard. Contamination OCD, while it isn't my main theme, it was the first one that I experienced really well. I don't know about ever, but it was the first one that I experienced really heavily. I know that I've talked to some people about how my OCD came out really bad while I was in college, and that was the first thing that really came forward. It was like all of a sudden I couldn't let things touch the ground, and if I did, I had to wash them, even if it was things that could not be washed. I could not clean up my room, and it looked like a disaster, but I couldn't fathom picking anything up and moving it if it wasn't totally clean. I even doing the simplest tasks, it seemed like so daunting because I was afraid I wasn't going to do it right. And I was kind of like frozen, basically. It was a very strange feeling, having somebody come up and pick something up and saying, can you put this away? And I just couldn't, and I couldn't tell them why. It was just like, I can't, no. So it was really hard. And luckily, it wasn't something that stuck around for a long time, but it, as I'm sure a lot of people have experienced, your OCD can change themes, and it did change, to the point that it was no longer my primary theme whenever I got into therapy. But, contamination OCD is something that can still be treated just like any other type of OCD. It is something that ERP works with. And the nice thing about working with an ERP specialist is that they can really work with you and make sure that you're doing exposures that are safe and still able to make progress. Okay. Oh my gosh, I jumped. Okay. Andrea. Hello, I struggle with rituals I've done for over a year. I've had very little support and have trouble with my ERP. How do you believe in yourself when you've hit rock bottom? First, I'm really sorry that you are at this point, Andrea. I've definitely hit my rock bottom, and I know how hard it is, and it feels like it's so much easier to give up, but it's easier to give up, but it's more worth it to not. And I say that looking back on where I was, wishing that present me could go back and say, even just for a second, it gets better, and you don't have to stay at that point that you're at. It may seem daunting. It may seem like it's not going to happen, but it happens before you know it. And even if you feel like you can't get to that point yet, you will, and you do. So, I would Believing in yourself doesn't mean that you have to have a perfect picture of what the outcome is going to look like or that it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that you have to think that you're going to 100% get there. It means that you have to believe that it's going to get better and it's going to change somehow. I could not have told you what my better would have looked like because I didn't think there was a better. I thought I was just going to be like that. And I hit a point where I said, I can't stand feeling like this anymore. I can't stand doing this to my friends and family. Because I was just hopeless and I couldn't do anything. I was just like a shell of who I was. And I was so sick of it. I was tired. I said, I cannot be like this anymore. Um, and I decided every day that even if it wasn't exactly where I wanted to be, I wanted to get better and I was going to be just a little bit better. And it was little things at little bit day by day, but you know, every little step that you take is still a step in the right direction. And eventually you're going to look back and see that you took so many steps and you are so far from where you were before. And I think having that belief that you're going to get better is that first big step that you need to take. So I think that, the fact that you are here right now talking to us is a very big sign that you're at least facing the right direction. You're going to get through these rituals. It may be hard now, and it may seem like you're not going to get all of them gone, but maybe tomorrow, instead of doing 10, maybe you do 9. That's still really, really great progress. And that's something that maybe you yesterday couldn't do. So even if it seems impossible, the best thing we can do is continue trying and pushing forward. Um, and maybe one day you can look back at yourself and think, I wish I could have told myself that 3 months ago or a year ago or whatever it may be, that I was going to be here. And I wish I could have seen this, but I'm here now. And you could be telling it to other people someday on a YouTube Live and having coughing fits in between each question. But thank you guys for dealing with that. It's crazy. All right. Jaws killed. I don't even know how to say this name. I'm going to say Jaws. Hi, Casie. I wanted to ask if it was possible for someone with OCD to go periods where they don't have any anxiety over intrusive thoughts, and then while having intense anxiety at other times. Yes. I definitely think this is very common. There was a point in life where I was working and I had most of my days were just filled with me obsessing about something to a point where I didn't feel like I was present ever. I was just constantly obsessing over things and asking for reassurance and getting stuck on the most random things. So that would be maybe like 5 days out of the week. And then the other 2 were me just so happy, so like just giddy over the moon, like, insanely happy. And it was great because I wasn't obsessing about anything, but I also knew that it wasn't going to last. So it was like bittersweet. Like, I'm going to enjoy these couple hours, or I'm going to enjoy this day that I'm doing this, but really I know that tomorrow something's going to trigger me and something is going to make me stuck. So now, and I think that was one of the reasons why I noticed I was getting better, was those days that I was obsessing were becoming less and less, and the days that I wasn't obsessing and I felt completely okay were becoming more often. And I didn't have that anxiety that something bad was about to happen, that tomorrow was going to be a different story. That being said, let me read your question again. Yeah, and I think too, something to keep in mind, and I think this scares people sometimes whenever you're doing ERP and working through your triggers, you might hit a point where those triggers don't bother you anymore. And, you know, looking at a picture of something doesn't give you intense anxiety, or saying something out loud doesn't give you intense anxiety. And that's not to say that you're okay with whatever it is, or that suddenly you like whatever thought you're having. It means that the idea of having that thought or saying it out loud doesn't trigger you. And I think it's especially important for people that have POCD or harm OCD or any of these more taboo themes in moral scrupulosity to really know that, because we're trying to desensitize ourselves to our thoughts and get it to a point where we can let them pass, and not so much to a point where we're agreeing and we're liking these thoughts, or whatever it is that we're thinking about. I like to picture my intrusive thoughts like ocean waves. I like to think about me floating on top of them, and a thought is kind of just like a wave passing by. And whenever I have a thought that I really like or I don't like, I'm just letting it float on by. And if I try to struggle and I get stuck on a thought and I fight it, then I can't float because I'm moving too much and I start to sink. So the best thing that I try to tell myself, especially when I get stuck on a thought and I'm like, I need to figure this out, even though I know I don't need to figure it out, I try to tell myself, I'm not going to struggle. I'm just going to float and let it pass by. So I know I kind of got a little bit off tangent with that, but yes, it is possible for somebody to have periods where they do have intense anxiety and then they don't. Let's look and see what else we have. Okay. Jeff says, I have ROCD. What do I do if I can't identify my compulsion? I will literally sit there doing an ERP and SUDS does not change. So for anyone who doesn't know what SUDS is, I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's measuring your anxiety as you're doing an exposure. So the idea when you're doing an exposure is to safely expose yourself to something that triggers your OCD, and it's not going to be super, super intense. It's supposed to be enough that it's exposing you, and you might start at like, your anxiety might be like at a 5 when you start, and then it might climb up to like a 6 or a 7 or an 8. We're not going to push you to 10 the entire time. That would be very, very exhausting. But we get you high up there. And the idea is that we sit with that feeling, and after a few minutes, your anxiety starts to decrease. So I might ask Jeff a few minutes in, what's your anxiety at right now? And he might say, I'm at an 8. I'm like, okay, good. We're going to keep going. Maybe 3 minutes later, I'll ask him again, what's your anxiety at? And he might say, it's at a 7 now. That went down. That's good. Keep going. Maybe a few minutes later, how are you doing right now? And he might say, I'm at a 4. I'm like, great. Let's take a break from this. And his anxiety went down by half. So that's the idea with ERP, is starting to get that number lower and lower and lower, so that eventually if I said or brought up whatever that trigger is, it wouldn't really get that anxiety that high up. So as far as if you can't identify a compulsion, it's hard. I would say, something that my therapist always had, and this is something that you're going to want your therapist to help with more. I'm not a clinician. I wish I was, but I can't say for certain what ways will identify your compulsions and what won't. But I guess I would try to think about, my compulsions were always, what is my OCD telling me I need to do? So whether that's needing to do something over again, whether that's I need to check something, or I need to play this scenario in my head over and over and over again. There's so many different things that can be considered compulsions, that it's hard to say. But something for me was that my OCD always urgently told me that I needed to do it and that I couldn't get past this moment without doing it. And that was the thing that I resisted, that I said, I'm not going to do that. And if my OCD was saying, I need to do this over again, or I didn't say that right, I need to say this thing out loud again, I'm going to be like, nope, I'm not going to do it. And it sucks, but it's also really great whenever you realize that you made it through that moment and you didn't need to say it again. It's just, that's where it is. And I know that you guys have all felt that out there, and it's okay if not every time you get through that moment without saying it, or doing whatever your OCD is telling you to do. So, but that's the thing to practice. And it gets easier the more you do. Liz, what is relationship OCD? So relationship OCD is, and it can look different for a lot of people. Most commonly, relationship OCD is around relationships with your significant other. It could be with family and friends, anyone that you have a significant relationship with. And it makes you doubt things about that relationship. So, OCD is considered the doubting disorder, is the best way I can describe it. It makes you doubt, am I really in love with this person? Is this person really my best friend? Am I really a good partner to this person? Are they still attractive to me? Am I still attracted to them? All kinds of different questions that can come floating up with a relationship, and your OCD makes you doubt it. So those are things that typically come up with relationship OCD, and it's not always going to be the same for everybody. It can be all over the place, but those are some common ones that I think come up with relationship OCD, and that's something that we can help with, that ERP does help with. Okay. What is your opinion on contamination OCD and how to deal with it? I think I covered this already a little bit, but contamination OCD, like anything else with OCD, can be helped with ERP and working with a specialist. So I would say if you're at a point where you're really struggling with it, to definitely reach out for an ERP specialist. Okay. Let me look and see. I have a lot of questions. I'm going to jump around a little bit. What does workplace OCD look like? What kind of issues has anyone had with work-related things? It's hard to say, Marcus. I think it depends on who or what your intrusive thoughts are. I think any sort of OCD theme can be present in the workplace. And if anyone in the comments wants to chime in and say if they've had their OCD come up in the workplace, definitely. I know I have. I remember specifically at an old job of mine, I would in the mornings have to take a picture of what I was wearing that day because I felt like I had to remember it. And if I was sending a Snapchat to somebody in the morning, first big girl job out of college, I was like all about sending Snapchats to everybody and saying, oh, it's Monday morning, whatever, but then I had to make sure I got everything right. And I had to make sure all the lettering was spaced exactly right. If I put any stickers or anything on it, I had to make sure they were exactly sized right. And, if my hand bumped it and I moved it, I had to start all over. And something as simple as sending a picture to somebody would take me 45 minutes. And there went almost an hour out of my workday. And it was terrifying. I was so mortified. I was embarrassed because it happened so often. And I couldn't explain it. At the time, I didn't know it was my OCD. I didn't know why this silly little thing that so many people my age were doing all of a sudden became so life and death for me. And I would get hot and sweaty and feel like I couldn't even do anything else. I couldn't get up and get something to drink until I had it just right. And, it affected my work. But, thankfully that was a while back and I was able to get out of that situation and get help. But it's still something I think back on all the time because it was something that I was too embarrassed to question and say, why is this like this for me and not anybody else? Um, and I think that's what's hard for us with OCD. If it doesn't look like the stereotypical um, symptoms that people think of, we don't really reach out for help. We just sit in silence and suffer with whatever we're going through because we think it doesn't make sense or it's stupid, even if it's causing us so much distress or impacting our day so much. Um, Other things in a workplace, I've heard of people needing to, can't send emails because they need to reread it over and over again to look for mistakes. Or I know I've done this myself in the past. Was write an email and then go back and reread it to see if you said something wrong or if you said anything that could be taken another way that God forbid would offend somebody. There's so many different things that can impact, um, relationship OCD, even in the workplace, if you have close relationships with anybody in there, or moral scrupulosity, if you're worried about lying to somebody or being dishonest. It's something that I think can impact anybody's work. And I think is even more of a reason to get help. I think that I am very blessed that I can work in a place where I can talk about my mental health as much as I can. But it's also, in my opinion, talking about it is a lot better and easier than never talking about it. So I guess that's one of the reasons that, normalizing OCD and mental health is so important, is so we can do things like this. Okay. Tasia, I think I'm saying it right. Any advice for fear of intimacy with our OCD? This is a hard one. And I'm sorry if you are going through this right now and it's affecting your intimate life. It's something that I've experienced and it's not fun. It takes a lot of fun and joy out of being intimate with somebody and having a relationship with them. At the time, looking back, I wish somebody would have told me that this was my OCD and it was not my thoughts, because I think when you're at a point in life where you have intrusive thoughts and you don't know yet that it's OCD, it is very, very hard and damaging, and it's scary. I think that if I could have gone back and told myself that this was my OCD and to ride it out, to push through it, try not to give it too much thought. As hard as it sounds to not give something like that thought, it's probably the best thing that you can do. And try to bring yourself back to center and back to where you're at, back in the present moment. Sometimes doing mindfulness activities help. I would try to think about the things that I could see, the things that I could touch. If I'm sitting with somebody and I'm trying to bring myself back to being present with them, maybe touching their skin or, touching their hair, whatever it may be, bringing yourself back to that present moment with that person, because our minds can go across the country if we want to. They will go all over the place if we let it. And it's hard and it takes a lot of mental strength to be able to say, no, I'm going to bring it back in and bring it here. But with practice, it's something that really works. I think it's practicing, like anything else with like mindfulness or yoga. I'm still awful at yoga. So if anyone has, or not yoga, meditation. I'm bad at meditating. So if anyone has tips for that, I stick with my sensory thing, that I look for things I can see, taste, smell, um, and that's my way to do it because my mind wanders too much. Okay. Oh, Matt has a good one for social anxiety. One exercise you could do that helps a lot with social anxiety is to stand in the middle of an elevator and look at others and think only about where you're going. That's a really good one. Um, yeah, it's hard whenever I think social anxiety is hard too because there's so many sensations going on at once and so many things happening around you that that's a good idea, and to think only about where you're going. Focusing, I think, on one thing at a time would be good. Taryn, any tips for explaining OCD to others? I'm very high functioning, so I appear fine to others. Sometimes when I mention I've been having a hard time, I don't think people believe me. I struggled with this a lot too, and I think it is very, very important to be able to explain what we're going through. I love that you asked this. I think this is so important for everybody to know. Um, Something that I tell people if they're looking to explain specifically a certain type of OCD is to go on our website at the blogs and the articles that we post, because they have a lot of really good, what is POCD? What is harm OCD? What is moral scrupulosity? And they lay out in very clear, easy to read words for somebody who might not have OCD that would understand. As far as explaining it in real time, I've had to do this a lot. I've had to correct somebody at a bar one time what OCD was amongst a lot of people, and it was very scary. I felt like I was being very, I was worried I was going to come off as rude, but they were actually very receptive to it. And I think it's about getting it to a point where it's like, hey, it's not this thing that people say it is, where you're, obsessed with organizing, and you would never predict that if you saw my room. But it's something that I try to explain. OCD is not something that people enjoy. It's a disorder that we doubt a lot, and we get stuck in this loop of obsessions and compulsions. um, you know OCD feeds off of our fears. If I was explaining my ROCD to somebody that I really cared about, I would say, I really, really value our relationship, and my OCD is latching onto that and making me question it because it's something that I value and I care about. People with harm OCD would never want to harm their loved ones, and their OCD is making them hyper aware of that, saying, what if you do this? What if this happens? What if this happens and you don't realize it? We get stuck in this cycle of worries and fears, and we feel the need to do compulsions to even that out, whether it's checking things, asking for reassurance, um, Googling, researching, doing repetitive actions over again until we feel safe, until whoever we're thinking about feels safe to us. It's a disorder that I think when people understand it, it makes a lot of sense and they can be empathetic. But unfortunately, we live in a society that likes to make t-shirts about it and, don't really understand it. And I think that's why I think since working this job, I have become a lot more conscious of even people saying it with other disorders. People saying, "Oh, so and so is so bipolar." Chances are that's not the meaning that they're intending to use. It's the same with people saying it's so OCD. It's not the same. And I think that spreading that kind of advocacy is really important, so that we might come to a point where we don't have to explain to people what our disorder is, and we can just say, yeah, I am Casie and I struggle with OCD. Welcome to my Q&A. But you guys know what I mean. Okay. Oh my gosh, I love Lana. Is that chair super comfy? Yes, it is. Me working from home, I needed to get a comfortable chair. And I ordered this online from Walmart, and it is amazing. So, anyone out there that works from home, I would recommend getting a gaming chair. I am not a gamer. I wish I was because I'd probably be cooler. Um, but gaming chairs are meant to be sat in for long periods of time because gaming. Um, so if you guys are interested, definitely, if you work from home, definitely get a gaming chair. It beats the kitchen chair. It beats sitting on a stool. Whatever you do, if you sit on the floor, gaming chair, 100% all the way. Okay. Adam says, I just want to ask, I was mainly with ROCD, now I have HOCD and harm OCD, and now I have thoughts to wash my hands. Why does it keep changing? So it's hard to say. I can't really answer that or answer why we even have OCD. You know, the best thing that I can say is that the more you learn ERP and you learn to manage your intrusive thoughts, the easier it is. My themes changed up a little bit too, and I noticed specifically for myself that all of my obsessive thoughts had pretty much the same or similar underlying fears. So it was a little bit easier for me to get to the root of the issue with it and come up with come up with exposures. Um, so, but it's not always going to be exactly the same. And I would say, that's the nice thing about learning a therapy like ERP is it can be applied to any subtype or any theme of OCD. If you learn ERP to get through your intrusive harm thoughts, you can still use those same skills to get through your intrusive thoughts about your morals and whether you're a good enough person. It's all follows this same thought cycle. It's kind of just filling in the blanks. I've literally written out a formula for, coming up with a response prevention message for myself. And I just change out the wordings for whatever that situation is or whatever that intrusive thought is. And it makes so much of a difference and makes it a lot easier for me to quickly adjust my ERP to that. Let me look and see. What if it feels like you enjoy your OCD? It might. OCD is the only disorder, and at least that I can think of, that makes you doubt whether you have it, makes you doubt if you like the disorder. It's really hard to say. And I think especially with the more taboo ones, it's very hard to understand whether or not, what if I enjoy this? Why am I thinking about this? Do I want to be thinking about this? And it can be very damaging. So, I would say that I can't tell you if you do enjoy them or not. I can't tell you if something is or isn't OCD. I can't always tell if I enjoy anything that I think about. But what I can do is I can choose not to engage in it, especially when it's things that I'm worried that I am enjoying a certain thought and I don't want to be enjoying a thought. I don't engage in it. I say, that's just a thought. I'm going to let it sit in my head and I'm going to let it pass. I'm not going to try to give it attention, try to figure out what it means. It's like we can't give it too much attention. And it's so, so difficult whenever it's something that distresses us or goes against our morals or we feel like we cannot let go. But the best thing that we can do, especially when it's something that is distressing us, is to let it go. Okay. Let me look and see a few more. Oh, I have my 4th session with No CD. I love it. That's so exciting. I can't even tell you what session I was last on with No CD. I did so many. There's no limit. There's the limit is endless. So definitely, if you want to continue with your therapist, do. Can you please talk about partner-focused ROCD? Adam, I would be interested to hear what your thoughts are about partner-focused ROCD, because as far as I know, I've had ROCD that has been very partner-focused, and I've had ROCD that has, I mean, I guess all my ROCD intrusive thoughts have always been around one person in particular, or at that period of time, or, it's like different people at different stages of my life. So I really have only ever experienced it that way. I guess I'd be interested to hear if other people experience ROCD different ways. It's definitely something that looks different for everybody. Um, but yeah, I would assume if I'm understanding correctly, it would be ROCD with intrusive thoughts surrounding one person in particular that you have a relationship with, or that's your partner, which is hard. And I'm so sorry that you're going through this, because, having a relationship with a partner is something that's supposed to be very enjoyable, and, you know, that makes you very happy. And ROCD is something that likes to creep in and say, no, you're not going to enjoy this. Um, so, I would say we got to treat it like any other form of OCD and not let it take away our happiness. So I know I see that I have like so many questions. We have like 9 minutes left. Um, so I'm going to try to get to as many of these as I can and try to scroll through and look for people that I may have missed. But if I did miss your question, I am sorry. And I would encourage you to come back to another night that we do these. We do them so often now, especially for this month for OCD awareness. I would really encourage you to come back and keep sharing your questions and keep talking to other people that have OCD, and, building our community. So, oh, my try some cough drops. Thank you. I have literally an arsenal of things. I think it's just something that I have to wait out. It feels like I just have a tickle in my throat like constantly. It's so annoying. What about thoughts that you can't explain into words? I've had this before, and I'm willing to bet that everybody on here has had them before. There are times that I was even in therapy and I felt like I couldn't explain something or put it into words. It was just like this feeling, or this fear. And something that helped me was, sometimes my therapist would say, what is your fear behind that? What if that thought's true? And I would say, I don't know. I just can't have it be true. And she would ask why. And I would have to sit and think for a while. But I would think, and usually if I just started talking, some sort of reason came out, even if it had nothing to do with it, even if it was no real correlation. OCD is so irrational. It is, our thoughts, we don't want to be having these thoughts. And they aren't always things that we can explain into words out loud. But usually, if you try, even if you feel like you can't find the words, if you're just kind of writing your thoughts out on paper and they don't make sense, putting it out there, it might start to make sense. And when I say make sense, I mean it might make sense to your therapist. It might not make sense to you or to your partner or your parent or whoever you're with. But again, nice thing about working with an OCD specialist is sometimes they can take these things that we can't really put into words and help us make sense of them enough to work through it and get us to let these thoughts go. Okay. Yes, definitely. It's hard whenever, struggling with being confused if you like your thoughts or not is very hard, especially when you're making progress and all of a sudden these things don't trigger you anymore. Remember, it's not It's not to say that you like these thoughts, it's to say that you're getting to a point where they don't trigger you anymore. And that's really the goal, is we want to work through these triggers so that we can let our compulsions go. All right. It's Juice. If you're still on here, welcome. We're so happy to have you. I'm glad that you found us and that you're a part of this community. Okay. Anyone's OCD gets worse with derealization, depersonalization disorder. I've definitely talked to people who have, yes. I'm not sure if anyone in the comments have answered you or not, but definitely there are people out there that I have spoken to that it does make their OCD worse. And I think that's a hard part when we have comorbid disorders. I know for me personally, my OCD was at its worst when my depression was also at its worst. They kind of sunk me to rock bottom together. But the nice thing was that as I started to get therapy and I really threw myself into ERP, my depression improved. And I suddenly had this motivation to get better and want to, be better and get through this disorder. So it was really beneficial for me whenever that improved, but it's not always going to be like that. Usually we tell people that if you're struggling with more than one disorder, tackle the hardest one first. Not hardest, tackle the most prevalent one first, the one that's affecting you the most. So whether that's your OCD or derealization / depersonalization, or depression or social anxiety, really working through the one that impacts you the most, and you might see that the other ones lighten up a little bit. How can I work with a therapist when my OCD is not yet controlled by medication and I don't even think I have OCD? So the one thing about not being sure if you have OCD, the nice thing about working with a specialist here, and a lot of places I think do this in the beginning, but we give you a diagnosis. So the first 1 to 2 sessions that you work with us, you do go through a diagnostic assessment, and they try to keep it they try to make it as little scary as possible because nobody likes to go through those first couple sessions with a new therapist, but it should feel like a conversation talking about what your OCD looks like for you. If you have these symptoms, if you don't have these symptoms, they can kind of give you a clear idea of what's going on, especially with OCD. It's important because, again, literally the one disorder that will make us doubt whether we even have it or not, and question that. So having a diagnosis is very important. And, if you feel at this point that you might be self-diagnosed, that's okay. Because a lot of us, unfortunately, with OCD being something that is very misunderstood in society, a lot of us kind of have to self-diagnose until we can get to a point where we can work with somebody who can give us the proper diagnosis. As far as being controlled by medication, you don't have to be on medication to work with a therapist. Some people do therapy without medication at all. The important thing is that you're getting care and you're getting treatment, whether that's with medication, without medication, without a therapist. There's so many different options out there. So definitely don't feel like you need to have your OCD controlled by medication. Andrea, I'm so happy that me sharing my story on contamination helped you. It's definitely going to have some days that are overwhelming and hard, but whenever you have those bad days, try to think back on, the good days that you've had. Just because you had 3 good days and you have 1 bad day does not mean that those 3 good days are gone or that you're going backwards. It's, recovery is such an up and down journey. And, it's something that I, for the longest time, didn't really understand what recovery meant for OCD. I was like, how do you recover from a mental health disorder? And now I think it's the most perfect way to describe it because it's something that I'm always going to live with, but I'm not anywhere near the level of distress that I used to be before I got help. And I think that can be said the same for everybody. there's still days where I get triggered by things. There's still days where I have compulsions that I need to resist, but I no longer spend the first 45 minutes of my workday obsessing over something small and getting upset and distressed and forgetting where I'm at. I don't wake up in the morning anymore with flooded, intrusive thoughts. Um, I can enjoy my relationships with people. And if a thought comes up, I say, okay, OCD, I see you. You can keep going now. Um, and I think the biggest thing that I've noticed too is that I used to take these special moments in life where I wanted to be as present as possible. And I had to think, I'm half here and half obsessing about X, Y, and Z. And now I feel like when I'm in those moments, I can be present and I don't have to be obsessing about whatever existential crisis that I was having at that point. I'm just there. And it definitely did not happen overnight. And there was a point in my life where I kind of felt like I had to prepare myself for being that way for the rest of my life. But I'm very lucky that I didn't listen to that fear and listen to that thought, because I wouldn't be where I am today. And if you guys aren't completely there yet, don't worry and don't beat yourself up about it. I almost didn't follow through with my OCD therapy, and can you imagine where I would be? I wouldn't be here doing this tonight, and I wouldn't be doing something that I love, and all because I almost didn't answer my phone call to learn more about therapy. I was like, nope, I can't do this. And thankfully, I decided to reach back out and call back. And at that point in time, I didn't have a plan on what better looked like for me or if I was ever going to truly get better, but I figured there's no harm in trying. And you never know where that's going to take you. So I'm sorry I did not get to everyone's questions tonight. It was so nice talking with you all. And anyone that's still watching, thank you so much for tuning in. It's been so wonderful talking with you all. I still look back on days where I didn't know anybody else that had OCD and kind of pinch myself that there's people out there like me and there's people out there like you. So thank you so much for tuning in and for dealing with my random coughing fits. I'm probably going to go drink a gallon of water now. But have a good night, everyone, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.